mutation, genetic drift, gene flow, natural selection. How do these mechanisms produce a change in population from generation to generation? Hello, SciPals! I am Sir Wilson Ramos, your science teacher for today. In this episode of Agham Alam Hub, we will explain the mechanisms that produce a change in populations from generation to generation. We will also describe mutation, genetic drift, gene flow, and natural selection. Finally, we are going to appreciate the importance of the effect of different mechanisms producing a change in population from generation to generation. In the next few minutes, we will explore science for another moment. Remember that through the geologic timescale, we could determine a record of life forms and geological events in Earth's history based on rock records. In Agham Alam Hub episode 11, we have learned about the different eras, namely Precambrian, Paleozoic, Mesozoic, and Cenozoic, and described how the Earth has changed through these periods and how life forms evolved from one time period to another. Today, we will describe the different mechanisms that produce changes in population from generation to generation that caused the evolution of different life forms on Earth. According to the Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium principle, allele frequencies in population will remain constant without the four factors that could change them. These factors are mutation, genetic drift, gene flow, and natural selection. These are the four key mechanisms that cause a population to exhibit a change from one generation to the next. A mutation is a source of new alleles in the population. It is a random change in the DNA sequence of the gene. A mutation can change one allele into another, but the net effect changes frequency. The change in the frequency resulting from mutation is small, so its effect on the evolution is small unless it interacts with other factors, such as selection. A mutation may produce an allele selected against, selected for, or selectively neutral. Harmful mutations are removed from the population by selection and will generally only be found in very low frequencies, equal to the mutation rate. Beneficial mutations will spread through the population through selection, although the initial spread is slow. Whether or not a mutation is beneficial or harmful is determined by whether it helps an organism survive to sexual maturity and reproduce. The history of many species has been affected by the gradual accumulation of tiny point mutations. However, evolution sometimes works much more quickly. Several organisms have an ancestor that failed to undergo meiosis correctly before sexual reproduction, resulting in a mutation that caused a total duplication of every chromosome pair. Such a process created an instant speciation event in the great tree frog of North America. The history of the great tree frog, Hyla versicolor, is an example of mutation and its potential effects. When the ancestral Hyla chrysocelis great tree frog failed to sort its 24 chromosomes during meiosis, the result was Hyla versicolor. This tree frog is identical in size, shape, and color to Hyla chrysocelis, but has 48 chromosomes and a mating call different from the original Hyla chrysocelis. Another way a population's allele frequencies can change is through genetic drift, simply the effect of chance. Genetic drift would be completely absent in a population with infinite individuals, but of course, no population is this large. Genetic drift occurs because the alleles in the offspring's generation are a random sample of the alleles in the parent generation. Alleles may or may not make it to the next generation due to chance events, including mortality of an individual, events affecting finding a mate, and even the events affecting which gametes end up in fertilizations. There are two types of genetic drift: the population bottleneck and the founder effect. A population bottleneck is a genetic drift in which a population size severely decreases. Competition, disease, or predation leads to this massive decrease in population size. The allele pool is now determined by the organisms which did not die. Some alleles increase in frequency simply because they are the only alleles left. An example of a bottleneck is the northern elephant seals. Northern elephant seals have reduced genetic variation, probably because of the population bottleneck humans inflicted on them in the 1890s. Hunting reduced their population size to as few as 20 individuals at the end of the 19th century. Their population has since rebounded to over 30,000, but their genes still carry the marks of this bottleneck. They have much less genetic variation than the population of southern elephant seals that were not so intensely hunted. In another type of genetic drift, known as the founder effect, a new population is formed or founded in a new location. If this new population does not interact and reproduce with the main population, the allele frequencies will be much more different from that of the parent population. Many islands contain species that only exist on a single island because of the founder effect. Eastern Pennsylvania is home to the Amish, who provides a striking example of the founder effect. It is estimated that about 200 individuals that immigrated from Germany founded their community. The Amish typically marry from within their community and are isolated, so the genetic mutations persist. Due to the founder effect, a condition known as Ellis-Van Creveld syndrome is much more prevalent among the Amish. This syndrome is a rare disorder characterized by polydactyly or possessing extra fingers or toes, dwarfism, and sometimes congenital heart defects. Another mechanism of evolution may occur during the migration of individuals from one group or location to another. When migrating individuals interbreed with a new population, they contribute their genes to the gene pool of the local population. This establishes gene flow in the population. Gene flow involves the movement of genes into or out of a population due to the individual organism's movement or their gametes. Organisms and gametes that enter a population may have new alleles or bring in existing ones, but in different proportions than those already in the population. Gene flow can be a strong agent of evolution. An example of gene flow in evolution happened through the spontaneous interspecific hybridization of lager beer yeast. Lager beer yeast, Saccharomyces pastorianus, results from the gene flow or hybridization between the two other types of yeast, one of which has higher level of cold tolerance than the other. The hybrid variety is more well suited to fermentation than the original types. Finally, the most famous mechanism of evolution. Natural selection occurs when populations of organisms are subjected to the environment. The fittest creatures are more likely to survive and pass their genes to the offspring, producing a better adapted population to the environment. The genes of less fit individuals are less likely to be passed on to the next generation. The important selective force in natural selection is the environment. An example of natural selection is observed with peppered moths. Most peppered moths used to be a light color with black spots. When London's atmosphere became soot-filled due to the burning coal during the Industrial Revolution, the white trees got darker. As a result, light-colored moths were eaten by birds more readily. Within months, most moths became darker. After factories had to reduce their soot output, light-colored moths increased in number. There is another type of selection in addition to natural selection. Artificial selection, also called selective breeding, is where humans select for the most desirable traits in agricultural products or animals, rather than leaving the species to evolve and change gradually without human interference like in natural selection. Dog breeding is a prime example of artificial selection. Although all dogs are descendants of the wolf, artificial selection has allowed humans to alter the appearance and behavior of dogs drastically. The common wolf ancestors was artificially bred to produce friendlier, faster, and more useful versions for the benefit of the human race. For centuries, dogs have been bred for various desired characteristics, leading to the creation of a wide range of dogs, from the tiny Chihuahua to the massive Great Dane. Remember that it is essential to know the effects of the different mechanisms that cause change to the populations from generation to generation. This allows us to infer how other organisms have evolved in the past and how organisms in the current time might evolve in the future. Likewise, knowledge about the different implications of these mechanisms can be crucial in conserving the Earth's biodiversity by protecting species, their habitats, and ecosystems from excessive extinction rates. In this episode of AAH Alam Hub, we describe the different mechanisms that produce a change in populations, such as mutation, genetic drift, gene flow, and natural selection. A mutation is a random change in the DNA sequence of the gene. The change in the frequency resulting from mutation is small, so its effect on evolution is also small. A mutation may produce an allele selected against, selected for, or selectively neutral. Genetic drift involves changes in the allele frequency due to chance events. Genetic drift can occur in any population of non-infinite size, but it has a stronger effect on small populations. Gene flow involves the movement of genes into or out of a population due to the migration of individual organisms or their gametes. Gene flow may bring new alleles or existing alleles, but in different proportions than those already in the population. Natural selection works by selecting for alleles that exhibit beneficial traits or behaviors while selecting against those for deleterious qualities. This produces a population that is better adapted to the environment. Another type of selection is called artificial selection or selective breeding, where humans select for the most desirable traits in agricultural products or animals that would benefit humans. Remember that it is important to know the effects of the different mechanisms that cause change to the population from generation to generation. This allows us to infer how other organisms have evolved in the past and how organisms in the current time might evolve in the future. Likewise, knowledge about the different implications of these mechanisms can be crucial in conserving the Earth's biodiversity by protecting species, their habitats, and ecosystems from excessive extinction rates. That's all for today, SciPals. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. See you again next week for another moment. Only here in AAH Alam Hub, Palagian's SciTech Portal. Bye!